Hello everyone and welcome to our arts lesson this third quarter period. This is the lesson under Arts Module 1. The main focus of this lesson is all about the arts of the Neoclassic and Romantic period. At the end of this discussion, I will be showing the activities you need to answer. So listen attentively all throughout the discussion. Grab your pen and paper so you can write down important details from the lesson. Let's begin. We will start with the artworks and artists that emerged during the Neoclassical or the period of Neoclassicism style. The word Neoclassic came from the Greek word neos, meaning new, and the Latin word classicus, which is similar in meaning to the English phrase first class. Neoclassical art pieces such as paintings, sculpture, and architecture generally portrayed Roman history which elevated the Roman heroes. Here are some of the characteristics of neoclassical art. It shows portrayal of Roman history. It has formal composition. It makes use of diagonals to show the peak of an emotion or moment. Artists use local colors. There is an overall lighting. And it has classic geostructure. Let's now proceed to neoclassical paintings. Neoclassical artists embrace the ideals of order and moderation in which artistic interpretations of classical Greek and Roman history were restored to realistic portrayals. Neoclassical painters gave great importance to the costumes, settings, and details of classical subject matter without adding distracting details but with as much historical accuracy as possible. Now I will introduce you to the famous neoclassical artists as well as their famous artworks that used neoclassicism. Neoclassicism didn't just exist in paintings. There are also sculptors who were able to apply the neoclassical style in their sculpture. Here are some of the artists that we are going to talk about. For painters, we have Jacques-Louis David and Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. For the sculptors, we have Antonio Canova and Bertel Thorvaldsen. First up, we have Jacques-Louis David. David was an influential French painter in the neoclassical style and considered to be the preeminent painter of the era. His subjects of paintings were more on history. First one from his famous artworks is The Death of Marat. This is David's masterpiece which shows the portrayal of a revolutionary martyr. This is a painting of the murdered French revolutionary leader called Jean-Paul Marat. Next artwork is entitled Napoleon Crossing the Alps. This painting shows a strongly idealized view of the real crossing that Napoleon and his army made across the Alps through the Great St. Bernard Pass in May 1800. Last one is The Oath of the Horati. It was a large painting that depicts a scene from a Roman legend about the dispute between Rome and Alba Longa. The three brothers, those who appear willing to sacrifice their lives for the good of Rome, are shown saluting their father who holds their sword out for them. Another neoclassical painter is Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. Ingres was a pupil of Jacques-Louis David. He was influenced by Italian Renaissance painters like Raphael, Nicolas Poussin, Botticelli, and his mentor, Jacques-Louis David. His paintings were usually nudes, portraits, and mythological themes. He was regarded as one of the great exemplars of academic art and one of the finest old masters of his era. The portrait of Napoleon on the imperial throne is one of Ingres' famous artworks. The painting depicts Napoleon in his decadent coronation costume, seated upon his golden-encrusted throne, and hand-resting upon smooth ivory balls. During his reign, the painting was owned by the Corps Legislatif, which was a part of the French legislature. The painting was believed to be commissioned by Napoleon as King of Italy. Another one is the Apotheosis of Homer. The painting was a state commission by Charles X to have him remembered in the building works of the Louvre. The painting depicts an image of Homer receiving all the brilliant men of Rome, Greece, and contemporary times. Let's now discover the famous neoclassical sculptors. First one is Antonio Canova. Canova was a prolific Italian artist and sculptor who became famous for his marble sculptures that delicately rendered nude flesh. He opened the idea for portraying discrete sexual pleasures by using pure contours with his mythological compositions. One of the famous sculptures that Canova made is Psyche Awakened by Cupid's Kiss. It is a marble sculpture portraying the relationship of Psyche and Cupid. Another one of Canova's work is the Washington, a life-size marble statue of George Washington done in the style of a Roman general by the Italian neoclassical sculptor Antonio Canova. This is a marble sculpture currently displayed at North Carolina Museum of History. Another famous sculptor is Bertel Thorvaldsen. Thorvaldsen was the first internationally acclaimed Danish artist. He executed sculptures of mythological and religious themes characters. One of Thorvaldsen's famous sculptures is the Christ. It is a marble sculpture image of resurrected Christ currently located at the Thorvaldsen Museum. Another one of his work is the Lion of Lucerne. It is a sculpture of a dying lion in Lucerne, Switzerland that commemorates the Swiss guards who were massacred in 1792 during the French Revolution. Let's now move on to the different neoclassical architectural styles that became famous during this period. Neoclassical architectural styles started in the mid-18th century. It turned away from the grandeur of Rococo style and the late Baroque. In its purest form, neoclassical architecture was a style principally derived from the architecture of classical Greece and Rome and the architectural designs of the Italian architect Andrea Palladio. I will now introduce you to the three most famous types of neoclassical architecture: the temple style, Palladian style, and the classical block style. First, let's discuss the temple style. Temple style building design was based on an ancient temple. Many temple style buildings features a peristyle, which is a continuous line of column around a building, which is a rare feature of Renaissance architecture. Here are some of the most famous temple-style buildings of the neoclassical age. We have La Madeleine de Paris, British Museum, and the Pantheon. Next is the Palladian style. Palladian buildings were based on Andrea Palladio's style of villa construction. Some of the buildings features a balustrade, which is a railing with vertical supports along the edge of the roof. There are vertical supports within a balustrade known as balusters or spindles. One of the famous Palladian architects in the era was Robert Adam. He was known as the Palladian architect of the Neoclassical, who designed two well-known American civic buildings, the White House and the United States Capitol. He had also designed many country houses. Last one is the classical block style. The building features a rectangular or square plan with a flat roof and an exterior rich in classical detail. The exterior features a repeated classical pattern or series of arches and/or columns. The overall impressions of such a building was a huge, classically decorated rectangular block. Classical block architecture also flourished in the United States, particularly in New York. Here are some famous architects that used the classical block style. First one is Henry Labrouste, and his masterpiece is the Library of Saint Genevieve. Another one is Charles Garnier. He designed the most famous classical block of all, which is the Palace Garnier, a neo-Baroque opera house. And those are all the topics about the neoclassical art period. Now, let's proceed to the next one, which is the Romantic art period or the Romanticism art style. Romanticism started in the year 1800 until 1810. It was a movement in which the artists of neoclassical period sought to break new ground in the expression of emotion, both subtle and stormy. It embraced several distinctive themes such as longing for history, supernatural elements, social injustices, and nature. Landscape painting also became more popular due to the people's romantic adoration of nature. Here are some of the characteristics of romantic art. It shows the height of action. It shows different emotional extremes. It celebrated nature as out of control. It makes use of dramatic compositions. And there is a heightened sensation like life and death moments. This time, I will show you the famous paintings that used Romanticism style. The paintings of the Romantic period gave more emphasis on emotions. Artists expressed as much feeling and passion as it could be on a canvas. Now, I will introduce you to the famous Romantic artists as well as their famous artworks that used Romanticism. First one is a painter named Jean-Louis Theodore Gericault. Gericault was the first French master and the leader of the French realistic school. His masterpieces were energetic, powerful, brilliantly colored, and tightly composed. One of Gericault's famous work is The Raft of the Medusa. It portrays the victims of a contemporary shipwreck. The people on this raft were French emigrants en route to West Africa. Another one is The Charging Chasseur. The painting portrays a mounted Napoleonic cavalry officer which is ready to attack. The painting was Gericault's first exhibited work, and it is an example of Gericault's attempt to condense both movement and structure in its art. The picture includes its dramatic diagonal arrangement and vigorous painting handling. Lastly, he painted The Insane Woman, one of several portraits Gericault made of the mentally disabled that has a peculiar hypnotic power. Within this period, he would address subjects with different mental health issues, and this can be contrasted visually to get an idea for how society would perhaps treat them differently, depending on their behavior. Another famous Romantic painter is Eugène Delacroix. Delacroix was considered the greatest French Romantic painter of all. He achieved brilliant visual effects using small adjacent strokes of contrasting color. He was the most influential to most of Romantic painters and eventually his technique was adopted and extended by the Impressionist artists. One of Delacroix's famous works is The Liberty Leading the People. This painting commemorates the July Revolution of 1830, which knocked down King Charles X of France. A woman holding the flag of the French Revolution personifies liberty and leads the people forward over the bodies of the fallen. Another Romantic painter is Francisco Goya. He was a commissioned Romantic painter by the King of Spain. He was also a printmaker regarded both as the last of the old masters and the first of the moderns. One of Goya's famous works is The 3rd of May. The 3rd of May is Goya's masterpiece that sought to commemorate Spanish resistance to Napoleon's armies during the occupation of 1808 in the Peninsular War. Another work of Goya is Saturn Devouring His Son. This artwork depicts the Greek myth of the Titan Cronus named Saturn, who fears that he would be overthrown by one of his children, so he ate each one upon their birth. And the last one is The Burial of Sardine. The Burial of Sardine was a Spanish ceremony celebrated on Ash Wednesday, and was a symbolic burial of the past to allow society to be reborn, transformed with new vigor. Romantic period is also the time where landscape painting emerged. Landscape painting depicts the physical world that surrounds us and includes features such as mountains, valleys, vegetation, and bodies of water. The sky is another important element shaping the mood of landscape paintings. Landscape art ranges from highly detailed and realistic to impressionistic, romantic, and idealized. Here are some of the landscape artists that became famous in the Romantic period. First one is Theodore Rousseau, and here are some of his landscape artworks. Another landscape artist is Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot, and here are his famous landscape paintings. Aside from painters, there are also a few sculptors that became famous in the Romantic period. Romantic sculpture can be divided into works that concern about the human world and those that concern the natural world. The leading sculptors of each type were Rude and Barye respectively. First one is François Rude. Rude was best known for his social art, which aimed to inspire and capture the interest of a broad public. He rejected the classical repose of the late 18th and early 19th century French sculpture in favor of a dynamic, emotional style and created many monuments that stirred the public for generations. One of Rude's famous sculpture is The Departure of the Volunteers. It is known as La Marseillaise. This work portrays the goddess Liberty urging the forces of the French Revolution onward. Another one of his work is the Jeanne d'Arc. In this sculpture, Joan is depicted at the age of 13 listening to the voices of Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Marguerite who ordered her to deliver France from the English occupation. Pictured is the plaster cased in Musée. Next sculptor is Antoine Louis Barye. He was the most famous animal sculptor of all time. He studied the anatomy of his subjects by sketching residents of the Paris Zoo. One of Barye's famous works is the Hercules sitting on a bull. Barye sculpted Hercules with the Erymanthean boar, depicting Hercules' fourth labor, where he had to capture a live wild boar from the Mount Erymanthus. Another one of Barye's works is Theseus slaying the Minotaur. It is the sculpture of Barye that shows King Aegeus and the Poseidon's son Theseus. They both visited Princess Aethra the very same night. Theseus holding his knife over Minotaur, a monster having the head of a bull and the rest of the body is human, devouring human flesh. In summary, here are the comparison of the characteristics of the artworks produced during the Neoclassical period and the Romantic period. To generalize the lesson, art forms of the Neoclassic period were produced in the late 18th century. These artworks are influenced by ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Neoclassic style is highly visible in paintings, sculptures, and architecture of the 18th century. Romanticism is highly contrasted with Neoclassicism. It is a reaction to the classical contemplative nature of neoclassical pieces. It seeks modernism and expresses emotion through art. Landscape painting became more popular due to the people's romantic adoration of nature. And that ends our lessons for Arts Module 1 today. I hope you learned a lot about the Neoclassic and Romantic period. This is just the first part of our third quarter lesson in art, so wait for the part 2 of this lesson that I will be posting next week. Now, as I said earlier, I will show you the activities that you need to answer in your Arts Module 1. These are just the activities for the first out of the 3 art modules this quarter. Make sure to complete all your activities. And that ends our lesson for today. If you have any questions, you can reach me through these posted social media platforms. Thank you all for listening and see you in our next lesson.